Kansas was an unsettled area within the vast Louisiana Purchase. In 1820, Congress passed the Missouri Compromise, admitting Missouri as a slave state. The bill further said that in the territory of the Louisiana Purchase and north of the southern boundary of Missouri, slavery should be forever prohibited. The balance of 12 free and 12 slave states was not going to solve the issue. In 1854, Congress passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act repealing the compromise. It was expected to take the slavery question out of Congress by putting it into the hands of the settlers in the new territories. Well, it didn't work. Kansas became a new battleground between the forces of slavery and freedom. Free staters were encouraged to come to Kansas to live and vote. Pro-slavery forces flocked in to outvote them. A conflict was inevitable. A Pennsylvania lawyer named Andrew Reeder was appointed the first governor of the territory of Kansas in '54. To become familiar with his new territory, he toured the larger settlements. The first census in '55 revealed 8,500 people, 2,900 voters. But a month later, in the first election for the territorial legislature, over 6,000 votes were cast. Many of these came from Missouri pro-slavery border ruffians who dropped in a neighbor-like to increase the election totals. At Pawnee in '55, the pro-slavery majority of the first legislature voted to move the capital to Shawnee Manual Labor School over Governor Reeder's objection. Later, Lecompton was made the territorial seat of government by the pro-slavery bogus legislature. That's what the Free State partisans named it. In Topeka, the Free State Party organized a constitutional convention. James Lane presided, and Jim was a man soon to make his influence felt in the territory. A constitution was adopted in Topeka which would abolish slavery in the state. Under this constitution, the Free Staters applied for Kansas statehood in the Congress of the United States. It failed, defeated by the Senate. So a mood of unrest continued in the territory. A resulting Free State legislature meeting in Topeka was forced to disperse by United States troops. Several Free State leaders were arrested and jailed. They were held in this building in Lecompton. It appeared as if pro-slavery forces had won, but this victory was only temporary. You see, Billy, Lecompton was now the slavery capital of Kansas. Anti-slavery sentiment was centered in Lawrence and Topeka, and in smaller communities such as Osawatomie, which was John Brown's home area. Skirmishes took place when pro-slavery men occupied such so-called forts as Franklin, Saunders, and Titus. Pressure on the Free Staters also came from across the Missouri border and from southeastern Kansas. Friction between the two elements kindled a series of small wars and massacres.
And before I'd be a slave.
And while Kansas bled, John Brown organized raids into Missouri, leading slaves north of freedom through what was called the Underground Railway. Many folks opposed Brown's violent tactics. Nevertheless, he remains a prominent figure in Kansas history, a man who died for his beliefs. After 1857, it was clear that Kansas would become a free state, as legislative power had gradually shifted to the abolitionists. In 1859, a new constitution was framed at Wyandotte. That was the name of a town then. It called for the abolition of slavery. It set forth the present boundaries of Kansas and named Topeka the temporary capital. While Kansas was waiting for statehood, Abraham Lincoln visited the state as a potential candidate for the 1860 election. On January 29, 1861, following years of heated controversy in Congress, the Kansas bill was finally passed, and Kansas became the 34th star in the flag. In raising the new flag, President-elect Lincoln said,
"I am invited and called before you to participate in raising above Independence Hall the flag of our country with an additional star upon it. I wish to call your attention to the fact that under the blessing of God, each additional star added to that flag has given additional prosperity and happiness to this country.
Now, the new state was admitted only 10 months after the first run of the Pony Express through Kansas. You've heard of the Pony Express, Billy. The mail was carried by horseback from St. Joseph, Missouri to San Francisco in the mighty fast time of 10 days. Relay stations like the one in the picture here in northeast Kansas were set up every 10 to 12 miles to provide fresh horses and food for the riders. But attention was soon turned to matters which threatened the welfare of Kansas and the whole country. Kansas was by no means a wealthy state. The people were periodically faced with drought and famine. And to add to the folks' misery, the rumblings of a civil war were beginning. You see, the slavery conflict had spread to other sections of the country. Kansas soon became entangled in the war between the states. For the most part, the battles on Kansas soil were limited to attacks by border ruffians and occasional invasions by Confederate troops. This was Lawrence on the morning of August 21st, 1863. It was just like any other morning, quiet, peaceful, but it was being watched by William Quantrill's hostile eyes. Nearly 150 men and boys were killed. Lawrence was in ruins. The next day, very little remained. "80 widows and 250 orphans were the result of the massacre led by Quantrill. Well, as the war continued, only one major battle was fought on Kansas soil. In October 1864, the state was seriously threatened by rebel troops under General Sterling Price. Several state units answered the call to arms. Near Kansas City, they helped to head off the Confederates and forced them to retreat to the south along the Kansas border. They didn't get into Kansas. But at Mine Creek, in Lynn County, 25,000 men engaged in combat. Union forces were victorious, capturing 800 prisoners and 2 generals. Before the war, Charles Robinson, a conservative, was elected the state's first governor. Senator Jim Lane was a bitter enemy. In spite of this conflict within the government, early legislatures managed to establish several state colleges. The University of Kansas was founded in Lawrence. Kansas State Agricultural College was established at Manhattan. And Emporia was selected as the site of the first state teachers' college. Baker University in Baldwin, which was Kansas' oldest 4-year college, had opened its doors 3 years before Kansas became a state. You see, Kansas was preparing for a new era.